To be human, you need a group. To be human, you need people around you. And the loyalties that religion brings, the identity that religion brings is the most sensible identity. It far transcends the identity of race, the identity of ethnicity, the identity of nation state. Religious identity is a logical and rational and sensible identity. People share values together, and that's the most important aspect of identity. And there's an anecdote that I didn't have time to mention, but it is so important. I do want to mention that, and then we segue to the next topic for today. There's an anecdote from the seerah that is very powerful in this regard. And that is that when you don't have religion, you don't see this identity, and you see the world through a racist or xenophobic or outright, racist, the words I'm looking for, superiority complex lens. And that example is the incident of Hudaybiyah, when the Prophet ﷺ came to Mecca after 6 years of not visiting Mecca. And one of the tribal chieftains visited to negotiate a treaty. And he's never seen Muslims before. The tribal chieftain, Urwa ibn al-Mas'ud al-Thaqafi, has never seen Muslims. And so he's trying to negotiate a treaty with the Prophet ﷺ. And he looks around and he goes, Ya Muhammad, he's not a Muslim, right? Ya Muhammad, look at the people around you. I don't see anything that brings them together. They're a hodgepodge of motley crew. He literally uses a dismissive term. A bunch of, different groups of people that nothing combines. You seem to be a bunch of, random people gathered together. And you've left your Quraysh tribe. You've left your other identity, and you don't have any other identity, right? But I'm obviously paraphrasing, but that's what he's saying. Like, what are you doing? Look around you. And this insulted the Sahaba so much that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh uttered a vulgarity. He literally uttered an extreme vulgarity that I'm not going to translate here, but you can listen to my seerah, or the most, vulgar phrases you can possibly imagine. The most kindest person, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, was forced to utter that vulgarity because Urwa said, look around you. You think these people are going to stick with you? There's nothing bringing them together, right? And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq literally uttered that vulgarity and said to him, to that vulgarity, and then said, do you think we would abandon him? Now, my point here for this anecdote goes back to what I was saying last time, that the loyalty of faith is so powerful, right? That it brings diverse groups of people together and forms bonds that even tribes don't understand, even racists don't understand. The bonds of Islam far transcend the bonds of anything else. And Urwa could not understand at all, whereas the Sahaba fully understood this reality, right? And we know this. Again, by the way, to be relevant here, the Palestinian conflict is a good example of this. The average Westerner really does not understand. Why are you guys who are not Palestinians so obsessed with that issue? It's just beyond them. Like, what has it got to do with you? They don't understand the ummah. They don't understand that what's happening there, it hurts us the way they could never imagine. Because it's thicker than blood. It really is. It's thicker than blood. It's literally, this is closer than family to us, right? And you have to understand the psychological reality is that they are dismissive of this connection because they just don't understand it. They are like Urwa. And we are like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, but don't utter the vulgarities. Don't utter the vulgarities because we don't need to do that right now. But we're like that. Like, don't you see? But no, they don't see because their paradigm is different than our paradigm, right? So again, to segue then, I wanted to just mention this anecdote to prove my last point, which is the bonds of ummah are more powerful than the bonds of any other identity. And they are the most rational and they are the most logical. You want to have bonds with people, not because of your skin color, how superficial, not because of you share an ancestor, how childish, it's not your fault you share an ancestor, and you want to share a bond with diverse people, and that's the beauty of the ummah. You want to share a bond with a person of a different color, a different nationality, a different language, a different background, but how are you going to share that bond? This is where the ummah comes in, the religion comes in. What a beautiful aspect, right? You form this massive network and you actually tap into human diversity. What other, now the nation state especially the modern nation state, attempts to do that, right? They have the facade of doing that, the diversity of this country, that country. But in reality, it's just words. What is the actual bond that we all share with the person of the same nation state? Nothing. It's a figment of imagination. Whereas the bonds that we share with fellow members of the ummah, it truly transcends any other nationalistic or ethnic or racist trope. And again, this is only the religion. There is no other ideology that is as powerful. I needed to mention this anecdote to, solidify what I said in our previous class. Now, with that, inshallah, we'll then segue to today's talk. And again, I've been reminded many times that I need to leave more time for Q&A. I always have too much to say, so I apologize for that. I'm going to try my best, inshallah. Let's see if you can just remind me of, however many minutes. Let's see, inshallah. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about two things. Let's hope I can do both of them. If not, then I'll do at least one. Of the benefits of religion. Now, this is a bit deep, and we're going to come back to this point in a future class post-Ramadan. Of the benefits of religion is that religion is the nurturing soil that allows the seed of conscience, your conscience, you have a conscience, the seed of moral conscience to be planted and to be nourished. I.e., we all have something called a conscience. We're going to come to this point, right? You need religion to solidify that conscience. Without religion, your conscience, even if it's there, will be weak, and it's very easy to be destroyed. So religion helps your conscience grow and strengthens it, and then it guides it in the right direction. Without religion, your conscience, if it exists, will be weak, and in all likelihood, it will actually cease to exist after a while. Now, this is a deep topic, and like I said, this is a summary of a subject we're going to come back to later on. So firstly, what is conscience? By conscience here, you all know what it means intuitively. Conscience is an inner sense. It's a spiritual faculty. It's an actual faculty. We don't just have 6 faculties. We have more than 6. There's something called conscience. And conscience is an inner spiritual faculty that guides us to, it's like a moral compass. Everybody feels guilty at some level when they do something. And everybody feels good at some level when they do some good. So there is something innate within us that is a conscience. And for today's class, again, we're going to come back to this topic later on. For today's class, I want to mention that from conscience, one can quite explicitly derive 5 benefits. Now, religion will then solidify these 5 benefits, right? Number 1, conscience acts like a moral compass. It intuitively guides you. Something is right and something is wrong. You know something in your heart without being a religious person. You don't have to be a Muslim to have a conscience. What I'm saying is being a Muslim solidifies the conscience. Being a Muslim nourishes the conscience. Being a Muslim protects the conscience, and it guides it, fine-tunes it. But even without Islam, a quote-unquote good person, and there are good people that have good qualities that are not Muslim. The Qur'an mentions this. We'll talk about this later on. Can you be good without being a Muslim? Well, define good, but technically, if you mean good, ethical, and moral, yes. If you mean theologically, no. But we're going to come back to this point later on. But you can have a good person. Why is a good person a good person? Because they have a pure conscience. So the first thing the conscience does is it acts as a moral compass. That there's an intuitive feeling of something being right and something being wrong. The second thing that a conscience does is that the conscience motivates you to do a good deed, i.e., your conscience will give you a desire to be good. You see an elderly lady, you're crossing the street, your conscience will be like, you know what? Let me help her carry the groceries, right? You see a blind man walking, your conscience will say, let me try to help him, right? You don't have to believe in a religion to want to do that. A person of good conscience, the conscience will motivate them to be good. This is point number 2. Point number 3, Once you've done the good deed, you feel a sense of spiritual validation. You feel a sense of, you get a cookie, a spiritual cookie. You feel internally sweet and happy. Wow, I did that today, right? And this is something positive. Point number 4, before you do a bad deed, your conscience feels what? It feels guilty, scared. It feels like I shouldn't do that. After you do a bad deed, it feels even more guilty. I.e., so this is number 5, before and after. So again, good deed before and after, bad deed before and after, and the moral compass. These are the 5 things, right? Moral compass, before good deed, after good deed, before bad deed, after bad deed. Is that clear? Is that clear? I don't find the level of, you want me to go over it again, or you have it down? Okay, so she has it down. You can get it from her. Okay, khalas. So the point being that this is a gift from Allah. If you think about it, obviously it's a gift from Allah. Think about it. Allah didn't have to give us a conscience, but Allah gave us a conscience, right? And that conscience, first and foremost, acts like a moral compass, right? We intuitively know certain things are good and certain things are bad. By the way, even babies know when something unfair happens, right? That's why babies throw a tantrum if there's something happens, like something is not fair, right? Even babies have an innate sense of, just an innate sense of right and wrong. It's ingrained in them. And a conscience motivates you to be good. And a conscience rewards you when you are good, before and after the deed. And a conscience causes you to be scared to do a bad deed. I shouldn't do that, man. God, it's not right. And then when you do it, it makes you feel so guilty that it acts as an incentive for you to give up the bad deed and become better. A conscience is an inherent cleansing mechanism for you, right? It's literally a gift that even when you do bad, there's something inside of you saying, oh man, I should have done that. And it motivates you to not do it again. You don't want to do it again because you know how it made you feel last time. That's a conscience. Now, obviously, you all understand, as a Muslim, this is an amazing gift Allah has given. But He didn't just give it to us. He gave it to everybody. Where does it come from? Remember, we're going to come to this topic in a lot more detail later on, and we're going to go back to this over and over again. So today is your first introduction to a very, very important and seminal topic in Islamic theology. And we will be covering it, as I said, in multiple facets and multiple angles. But today is your first introduction. So a very brief interlude, if you like, to talk about this. Conscience is one of the manifestations of something called the fitra, okay? All of you need to understand what is the fitra and realize we're going to come back to the concept of fitra many times. What is the fitra? By the way, before I get to the Islamic side, I do have some interesting quotes from the Western side. I like to talk about the Western stuff as well so that you appreciate. Again, understand, I'm not an expert in the Western philosophy. That's not my area of training. But it's interesting for us to understand and see. So before I get to the Islamic side, I actually did a quick research about conscience in the Western tradition. In the Western tradition, early philosophers and theologians actually did consider the conscience to be a divine gift from God. Most famously, Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas, who is the architect of Catholicism. Thomas Aquinas is the first great, medieval Christian theologian who wells together aspects of philosophy with aspects of Christianity. And so Aquinas is considered to be one of the hallmarks, if you like, of early Christian thought. And of course, by the way, you should be aware, Thomas Aquinas is indebted to Islamic philosophy. Much of what he says is coming from the Islamic tradition, and that's not an exaggeration. That is absolutely factually correct. Thomas Aquinas quite literally copied and pasted entire chunks out of the literature that was translated from Arabic into Latin right before his time frame. And so Aquinas is a conduit, tapping into Islamic thought, tapping into Islamic philosophy, and then slightly modifying it to Christianity, and then it becomes a segue. So perhaps, I'm not an expert on Thomas Aquinas, perhaps Aquinas is tapping into Islamic thought about the fitra. I don't want to definitively state that, but for sure, Aquinas is tapping into Islamic thought overall. That's without a doubt. As for the fitra, I'm not an expert, so I don't want to say, but what he says is basically similar to what we would say. And Thomas Aquinas said, in his Summa Theologica, volume 1, page 79, if you want to get the quote, conscience is said to witness, to bind and incite, and also to accuse, torment, and rebuke. Basically exactly what I said. Conscience witnesses, binds you to do something, incites you, motivates you. And it also accuses you, i.e. prevents you from doing that, torments you, guilty conscience, rebukes you, causes you to come back to the straight path, right? So it's a divine gift. Thomas Aquinas felt that the conscience is a faculty that God has given us that applies moral principles to specific situations. It is a God-given gift that allows you to extrapolate from the broad morality in your heart to the specific situation. So that is very Islamic in its understanding. Fast forward a few centuries and you get to Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is writing in 1790 or so. Of course, Thomas Aquinas is 1250. So Immanuel Kant, 500 years later, Kant is not a Christian. Thomas Aquinas is a Christian. Kant is more of a theist/deist, right? Kant is not like your card-carrying Christian. Again, the Western philosophy began within Christianity, Descartes, Aquinas. Then it goes into theism, deism, like Kant, and then it goes into all-out atheism, such as most modern philosophers who don't really want to talk about God as well. So Kant is your, average deist/theist, right? He's not a Christian, but he believes in God in his own way. Because again, in 1790, you're not going to be an atheist. We're going to come back to this. There were no atheists in all of human history up until 1750. Believe it or not, there were no atheists. No such thing as a card-carrying atheist up until modernity. Atheism is a very, very modern phenomenon. No atheists existed anywhere in the world up until 200-300 years ago. People denied a Christian God. They didn't deny God per se. Big difference between the two, right? So Kant is a deist or theist, and Kant believes that conscience comes from, quote unquote, the laws of nature. Again, this is how theism and deism describes conscience, the laws of nature. And he writes in his book, Religion Without Bounds, book 1, paragraph 6, he says, listen to this. Man cannot help but feel, this is not God, this is ingrained in man, within him a judge, this is the conscience, that calls him to account and holds him in awe. And this authority watching over the law in him is not something he himself arbitrarily makes, but is rather given to him by nature, end quote. You see what he's saying here? There's something inside of you that causes you to uphold the law. You want to uphold the moral code. You can't help it. You have it within you. You want to be good and abstain from evil. And you have this intrinsic desire to do so. Where does it come from? It's given to him by nature. What is nature? It's a word you invented. He doesn't want to say God. He doesn't believe in the type of God we do. And so these are the laws of nature. Okay? So, but still, Kant is appreciative of conscience, clearly. He likes it. He wants it. He praises it. Where do you think the Western trajectory is going to head? Does the modern world like the conscience? What do you think? No. And the first person, or one of the first people to start eroding away or demolishing is, of course, none other person than the crazy, I could say a lot of stuff, but let me just be PG here, Sigmund Freud. Freud is like, Allah Mustan, something's wrong with him. Without a doubt, something's wrong with him. I think something happened in his childhood, but anyway, that's besides the point. So Freud, and literally this is not even exaggeration, Freud views the conscience not as a positive, but as a negative. He calls it oppressive. You are subjugated by your conscience. Freud literally tipped the scales. Rather than Aquinas praising the conscience, right? Kant saying, that's great, nature has imbued you with a desire to be moral, right? Freud views the conscience as being oppressive, as being implanted by your parents and society, right? And as something that is instrumental in forcing you to act in ways you should not act. And hence, rebelling against one's conscience is discovering freedom. This is the segue to hedonism. this is the segue to the world we find ourselves in today. You shouldn't feel guilty. You should feel guilty for feeling guilty, right? Don't feel guilty for anything you do. Go and discover your senses. Go and do whatever you want. And if you feel guilty, this is the repressions of your parents in you, right? This is your subjective, your oppressive upbringing that has imprinted in you something that shouldn't be in you. You should liberate yourself from the shackles of conscience, right? This is literally the segue to the world we find ourselves in. So it's interesting to see the evolution of conscience in the Western field. Now, from our paradigm, conscience is a gift from Allah. And as I said, for us as Muslims, conscience is one of the many manifestations of something called the fitra, right? What is the fitra? What is the fitra? So we're going to come back to this. I said this so many times. The fitra is an innate spiritual faculty. By faculty, I mean just like the brain is a faculty, just like the eyes are a faculty, just like feeling is a faculty. It is something that can assess and give you information. Your eyes can assess the rays of light and give you information, right? Your hands can touch and give you information. Your ears can get sound waves and give you information. Your brain can analyze data and give you information. We don't just have 6 faculties as Muslims. Allah blessed us with others, and of them we have the fitra. The fitra is another faculty that is not mind, it is spirit. We believe as Muslims, we have intellectual cognition, the thought process up here, and we have spiritual cognition. That's the fitra. The fitra is, okay, to be simplistic, the heart thinking. We actually believe this as Muslims. We have the mind thinking, that's intellect, that's aql. Then we have the heart thinking, that's the fitra. Now, later on, we're going to come and distinguish between the mind and the heart. That's a later topic. For now, all we need to know, there are many differences. Of the main differences, spiritual thinking is not acquired, it's gifted by Allah. Whereas intellectual thinking, it is acquired. Intellectual thinking is learned. Intellectual thinking varies from person to person. Not all IQs are the same. Spiritual thinking, we're all gifted the same at birth. Spiritual thinking, the fitra, we all have the same amount at birth. Nobody has more fitra than the others at birth. We're all equal. Our hearts, our soul are all equal. We equally have the cognitive faculty of the soul, the spiritual soul. And we know this from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. How do we know the fitra exists? Well, we know it from the Qur'an and Sunnah, and we also know this from observed reality, such as conscience. How do evolutionary biologists explain conscience? Where does conscience come from? Why do you feel good if you do a good deed and bad if you do a bad deed? Where does it come from per se? It's in a child. We know this. I mean, psychiatrists can observe there's something called the beginnings of conscience even in children. So for Muslims, we believe it's a part of the fitra. Please note, make a note for those of you that are taking notes. For those that aren't, I know you're all memorizing, mashallah, every single word I say. So if I ever give an exam, mashallah, you'll score 100 out of 100. I know this, mashallah, right? Correct? Yes, alhamdulillah. Because you haven't taken a single note since weekend. That's okay. You're not the only one. Alhamdulillah. Just specially teasing you, don't worry. You're turning red. It's okay. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Where was I? Before I went into... Guys, where was I? See, look at, you can't even tell me where I was 1 minute ago. What was I saying? Something fitra. Thank you so much. Okay. See, the guy that's taking notes can actually quote me back. You see the difference? You see the difference? The one who's taking notes can actually tell me exactly what I'm saying. So, the fitra. Oh, what were you doing then? You're asking questions. Okay, alhamdulillah. He wasn't taking notes. He wants to clarify. Okay, I praised you. You could have taken that. But his fitra told him, I have to be honest. And his conscience said, khalas, I have to refuse this phrase and be honest to myself, okay? Sign of a pure fitra. Okay, so the fitra, please make a note of this. Conscience is not the totality of the fitra. The fitra tells us and gives us many different cognitions. Conscience is one of the gifts of the fitra. Please make a note of this, right? The fitra is much more than just the conscience. But the origin of the conscience, where does it come from in our religion? The fitra gives us many things. We're going to talk about some of them later on. Today, we're going to talk about conscience, and by and large, we're not going to come back to it later on. So this aspect of the fitra, we're going to talk about. Of course, the fitra is explicitly mentioned in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah. As for the Qur'an, multiple verses of them is the famous verse in Surah Al-Rum, verse 36, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. This is the fitra that Allah created mankind upon. So by the way, the word fitra, it literally means an implantation. Fatara means to open up. So fitra, that which has been opened up and implanted like a seed, something deep embedded. It is your spiritual DNA. It is your literal psyche. It's implanted and embedded in you. You cannot completely get rid of it. It is you, your inner soul, your fitra. And of course, where does it reside? In your ruh, not in your brain. In your ruh, in your soul. It is a part of your ruh. So your ruh has a heart, like your body has a heart. And the heart of the ruh is basically that fitra. And again, it's not tangible, it's not physical, it's in your spiritual DNA. So Allah says, I gave fitra to all of mankind. Fitrat Allah, allati fatara nasa alayha. The fitra that Allah has given all of nas, everybody, not just Muslim. And our Prophet ﷺ underscored this point in the famous hadith in Bukhari and Muslim. You need to memorize this hadith. It is an essential hadith, not only to our class, but to the religion of Islam. We're going to come back to this over and over again. The Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Every child that is born on earth is born upon the same fitrah. No exceptions. Muslim child, Zoroastrian child, Christian child, Hindu child, pagan child. The parents are as they are. The child is born the same. كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ. Every mawlud is every born, baby born. Every single baby that is born upon the same fitrah. Then his parents, يُهَوِّدَانِهِ, make him into Yahudi. أو يُنَصِّرَانِهِ, make him into a Nasrani. أو يُمَجِّسَانِهِ, make him into a Majusi or Zoroastrian, right? And then the Prophet ﷺ said, just like a calf is born without the markings, you know, when you brand, so you all know cattle is branded, right? Every cattle is branded by the owner, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, just like a baby calf or a baby a camel is born without any branding, and then you branded. Do you see any baby born with the branding? The Prophet ﷺ said, they said no. So that is the fitrah, meaning purity. The fitrah is pure. Corruption occurs afterwards. The fitrah is unblemished. Change occurs afterwards. The fitrah is natural. Anything unnatural is done afterwards. So the Prophet ﷺ literally said, every child is born upon the exact same fitrah, and then the parents and society change the fitrah. Now, as we said, fitrah has many manifestations and many aspects we're going to talk about later on. Today, we will talk about that one quick aspect which we talked about now, and that is conscience. Because one of the blessings of the fitrah is that Allah blessed our soul to automatically yearn to be good and automatically despise to be bad. And this is in contrast to many other faith traditions that say man is created in sin and man is created in evil. We believe the exact opposite. Man is created in good and man wants to be good. And man generically is predisposed to like good. Allah didn't set the stage against us wanting us to be bad. Allah created us and He gave us an inherent guide, an inherent compass. We have a compass within us, and that compass, it points true north, i.e. the north here is the guidance of Allah. It points us to that which is good. And so Ibn Taymiyyah, by the way, out of all the early scholars pre-modernity, Ibn Taymiyyah is the scholar that has most discussed the fitrah. And that's why I myself in my doctoral dissertation, I have an entire chapter on the fitrah because it deals a lot with Ibn Taymiyyah. And my PhD is on Ibn Taymiyyah and his book about aql and naql. He uses the fitrah a lot in that. So Ibn Taymiyyah writes, and I quote from Majmu' Fatawa Volume 10, page 267, the human soul has been created in the state of original fitra. And the fitra, listen to this, naturally inclines towards wanting the truth, recognizing the truth, and loving the truth. Notice, the fitra wants the truth. The fitra recognizes the truth, and the fitra loves the truth. And it inherently rejects evil and dislikes evil and goes away from evil. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah did not use the word conscience, because that's not in his vocabulary, but this is conscience. It's exactly conscience, right? You want good, you like good, you appreciate being good, and you don't want to be bad, and you don't like being bad, and being bad makes you feel bad. This is the conscience. And Ibn Taymiyyah writes that the fitra requires, this is now why we're talking about the fitra today, the fitra requires spirituality to be nourished. Without spirituality, without religion, the fitra withers away and possibly almost is destroyed, or maybe even destroyed. So what we are saying today, why do we need religion? Religion solidifies the fitra. And it's the only thing that solidifies the fitra. Without religion, now pause here, by religion we mean Islam. So we're just going to have to jump the, no other religion is going to, however, I will say, other religions might partially satisfy the fitra, partially. Other religions might partially feed and nourish the fitra, which is why overall religious folks have better conscience if they're good in their religion than non-religious folks, right? So some good religiosity, some pure religiosity, by pure I mean they believe in their religion, is better than no religiosity, because some religiosity is positive for the fitra. So Ibn Taymiyyah says that the fitra therefore is nourished by the deen, the religion, and it strengthens, and it is strengthened by it. However, a key point we have to make here, and I hope you all understand this, the existence of the fitra is independent of religion. You understand this point? You guys understand this point? The fitra exists before the religion. You are born with it. Everybody's born with it. What does the religion do? It protects it. It sustains it, it nourishes it, and then it also fine-tunes it. Because without religion, you might have a conscience that is 80% good, but 20% not good. Your moral compass might be off a little bit, right? Without religion, your fine-tuning of the compass might not take place. And you might think something to be good when it is not good. And that goes back to my previous week class of ethics and laws, and we need the religion to teach us ethics and laws. With religion, the fitra is protected and nourished. Religiosity, spirituality strengthens the conscience, which is why when you're religious, automatically you desire to do more good. And automatically evil makes you feel more evil. Why? Because the fitra is nourished. You all know this. In Ramadan, we feel much worse for committing the sins we do pre-Ramadan and post-Ramadan. Why? Because religiosity has nourished the fitra. The fitra automatically is conscience. And so religiosity and conscience are causally linked together. Is that clear? Without religion, conscience suffers. You will never have a strong conscience. You might have a partial. You will never reach the full potential of your conscience without pure religion. And of course, pure religion for us is only Islam. And therefore, to conclude this point, truly what a blessing from Allah that He has given us an inherent, innate sense that guides us, that motivates us to be good, that rewards us for being good. If Allah had wanted to, we wouldn't have a conscience. So we could do all the good in the world and we wouldn't feel anything. And we just do it for some type of otherworldly akhirah good, which is fine. We would have done it, inshallah, anyway. But isn't it a blessing from Allah that He gave us literally checks and balances in our own life? It's internal. You don't even have to be a Muslim to feel those checks and balances. Even a non-Muslim feels bad for being rude to somebody he shouldn't have been rude to, for stealing, for lying, for murdering. A person even of a slight conscience genuinely feels guilty. And that's a blessing from Allah, because that guilt is meant to do what? Cause him to not do that again, cause him to be motivated to do good and to be a better person. And even the person who has no belief in Allah feels good when they do good. When they, give money to a homeless person, they feel good, they feel validated. It's a spiritual cookie that comes in. And then the final point, and inshallah with this we'll open the floor for Q&A. This is an entire point, but I'm going to do it in inshallah 3 minutes inshallah. And I leave the research to you because it's super easy. Completely different point. What other benefit does religion bring? One of the benefits that religion brings is that religion has been tangibly proven. It has been psychologically, sociologically proven to make the quality of life better for the person of religion. And here I have 2-3 pages of studies that have been done. I'll just quote you some of them, but honestly, all of you are college students. You can just go onto JSTOR, go onto any, academic website, and you will find a ton of papers. In fact, not only papers, you have meta studies done, i.e. a meta study is a study of studies. So you take hundreds of papers and you draw conclusions from them. We have numerous meta studies done across all disciplines that almost universally show that people of religion have a better quality of life in numerous areas. For example, in 2002, Professor Brian Johnson and his colleagues at the University of Pennsylvania reviewed 500 studies that have been published in peer-reviewed journals about the benefits of religion, and they concluded that religion they concluded that a vast majority of analytical studies have demonstrated a positive correlation between religious commitment and higher levels of well-being, self-esteem, and lower levels of hypertension, depression, and criminal delinquency. I.e., religiosity makes you feel life is sweeter. Religiosity makes you deal with the stress of life in a better manner. Religiosity helps you battle with depression. Religiosity diminishes criminal behavior. In another meta-analytical review carried out by McCullough and Pohl, a group of professors at another university, I don't have it in this paper here, in another meta-analytical review, 200 social studies papers are reviewed to demonstrate that high religiousness predicts a much lower risk of depression, drug abuse, and suicide attempts. So religious people overall, generally speaking, suffer less from depression, drug abuse, and suicide attempts. And in another survey done, mental distress, Gallup and National Opinion Research and Pew have all concluded that people that are spiritually committed to religion are at the very least twice as likely to report being very happy at the quality of life than those that are the least committed religious people. So overall, finding happiness in life, this is quantitatively proven by lots of researchers in many disciplines. And one other aspect of religiosity that a number of academic papers have concluded, and I quote you a social scientist by the name of Arthur C. Brooks, who once again did a meta-analysis in a paper about religiosity and its effects. He says, and I quote from his paper, I'm going to have all the references here, the differences in the giving of charity between secular and religious people are dramatic. This is his words, not mine. Religious folks versus those who are not religious. Religious people are 25 percentage points more likely than secularists to donate money. 91% versus 60%. 23 points higher likely to volunteer their time. And he goes, this is across all different faith traditions, right? So overall, being religious in any faith means you are helping humanity more across all faith traditions. By the way, in his survey, he did not study Muslims. He did different Christian sects and Jewish faiths. I don't know why he didn't do Muslims. Fact of the matter is, other surveys have shown Muslims are the most when it comes to charity. I'm not making this up. You all know this. Zakat, I mean, you don't even need to. It's a pillar of our faith to give zakat. So in terms of giving back, we are number one out of all faith traditions. Again, religiosity and helping humanity, this is a palpable and tangible and observed and scientifically studied reality. Religious folks enjoy life better. Religious folks are able to battle depression better. And again, it doesn't mean that you can't have depression while being religious. We're just being statistical. We're being obviously, broad research in this regard. Overall, religiosity helps battle a lot of negative things. And religiosity brings comfort, makes you help humanity, makes you volunteer your time, makes you more charitable. These are observable phenomenon across all spectrums of religion. And with this, inshallah, we actually have a solid 15 minutes. I had to zoom over that last point here. And now, inshallah, if we can have Q&A. Do you have the code for questions? How are they get? Okay. The code is on there, so inshallah we can try to answer some questions, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so how does someone deal with the fitra being tarnished? If you are born pure upon the fitra and your parents destroy fitra with their ideologies, you never have a chance to have true inclinations toward the truth. Okay, so the fitra, as we said, is nourished with religiosity. And one of the things that we notice is that people who preserve aspects of their fitrah always find comfort, even if they're not born Muslims. They find comfort in being religious. And we would argue, and I'm going to come back to this point after Ramadan, inshallah, we would argue that anybody who attempts to preserve the fitrah and wants to have a pure fitrah will automatically be attracted to Islam and end up converting. I.e., a pure fitrah leads to conversion. A pure fitrah, as Ibn Taymiyyah says, that the pure fitrah is automatically attracted to the message of the prophets. It's like magnets. He literally writes this. The pure fitrah is automatically attracted to the wahi that Allah has sent down. It's something you can't even negate. And that's why people who have a pure fitrah end up converting to Islam, because they are automatically sensing the truth. So this is why we need religion, and fitrah alone is not sufficient. This question right here, because the fitrah can be corrupted. Religion, as I said, protects the fitrah. Religion guides the fitrah. The fitrah can be corrupted, but religion is the fine-tune that will find its proper way. Question: how is a psychopath, a child born with intent to kill, explained in accordance with the fitrah? Okay, multiple ways to do this. Listen, first and foremost, if a person is genuinely mentally unstable, and they are not able to control their actions or desires, we will treat them in this world according to their actions, and Allah will treat them according to how much capacity they had. Do you understand the difference here? If a person is genuinely not in control of his senses, and there are people like this who really just are basically beyond the scope of normal humanity. Well, we have to treat them according to their actions because we don't know their hearts. And we will treat them and punish them according to their actions. That has nothing to do with their akhirah. In the akhirah, if a person truly was mentally insane, truly was not in control of his or her senses. So to backtrack, it is possible that people are not normal. And that means the pen has been lifted from them and they will not be held accountable. That's the reality. Or people that are born mentally, they're not there. Whether they have a mental disability and whatnot, the Shari'i term for them, غير مكلف. There is no laws binding on them, right? And on the Day of Judgment, they will be forgiven. But we don't know what's here and there. And we have to treat people based upon their outer actions. So we deal with them on the outer and we leave Allah for the inner, which quite literally means, because how do you know there's a genuine psychopath who can't control the emotion to kill versus a murderer who enjoys killing and wants to kill? How do you know the difference? Do you? You can't. So we have to treat the both of them the same because their actions are the same. And by the way, they both pose the exact same threat to mankind. So why should we treat them differently? We want to protect mankind. We will treat them the same. We will punish them the same. And that means execution if they're caught. And they will go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one who was a murderer intentionally, the one who killed and he was mentally sane will be punished like the murderer. And the one who was genuinely, a psychopath that could not control. We believe there are people that are born, without natural intelligence. Allah Azza wa Jal tested them and tested us. That's a test. They have been lifted from taklif, and Allah will forgive them if they genuinely could not control themselves. Wouldn't evolutionary biologists say that conscience exists because it's beneficial for the survival of the species? So again, we're going to come back to evolution and the issue of evolution. How do you explain consciousness and conscience? We're simply a bunch of atoms coming together. How do you explain there's something actually that is conscious? You are ascribing mystical powers to atoms coming together. You're ascribing literally faculties to atoms that just form bonds together. So of course evolutionary biologists say this, but these are mere words. And again, the precision of the universe, the fine-tuning argument, it's a very Islamic argument. If you know your fine-tuning argument in modern philosophy, the existence of the universe is so complex. To claim that it just comes out of nowhere, to claim that we have a conscience because it's better for humanity, you are ascribing to every atom of creation that it is somehow in sync with all other atoms, and it wants to preserve life as it exists, and it's working in tandem with everything else to bring this about. You might as well just believe in a God at that point in time, because you're ascribing divinity to atoms at that point, right? So anyway, this is, it's a circularity here. What is the exact difference between nafs and fitra? And does the nafs also yield naturally towards religiosity? So the nafs is broader than the fitra. The nafs is the soul, if you like. The nafs is sometimes synonymous with the ruh. And if it is synonymous with the ruh, then the fitra is a part of the ruh, because the ruh also gives us life. The ruh also gives us, without the ruh, we're a corpse. Without the ruh, we're a dead body. So the ruh or the nafs is bigger than the fitra, but one can say the fitra is the DNA of the ruh. The fitra is the qalb of the ruh. One can say it that way. In any case, in the end of the day, you can't have a ruh without a fitra, right? In sane people. In people that are not sane, you have the ruh and you don't have the normal DNA, or you don't have the spiritual DNA, so they will not have the fitra. Final question we'll do. If everyone has the same fitra, how were the Prophet's fitra so much more pure? Very simple. You're born with the same fitra, but then the fitra is honed down, corrupted, weakened. Whereas the Prophet's fitra is not weakened. You're born with the same fitra, and then the Prophet's fitra is nourished. And the fitra of the Muslim within Islam is nourished. Whereas the fitra of a non-Muslim is wetted away. It is chiseled, but there's always an element there until a person reaches adulthood. And then if they really choose to, and they battle themselves to destroy their conscience, they can attempt to do so. And this is the worst level of kufr. But the average person always has an element of fitra left. There's always a spark of, some type of goodness or whatnot. Only the worst of the worst people who have actively struggled to destroy their own fitra. And that never happens to, somebody innately, unless they're born, as we said, with the test from Allah. And that's obviously a separate point.